Hot Stove Show, 93.7 WEEI. Kirk Minahan, Alex Spear, Ian Browne, in for Rob Bradford. And joining us now on the AT&T hotline is the assistant general manager for the Boston Red Sox, Mike Hazen. Mike, it's Kirk Minahan, Alex Spear, and Ian Browne. How are you this evening?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Not too much. I gotta wonder, okay, because I'm following this stuff on Twitter all day. I'm online. I love the trade stuff. Mike, as you know, is a fan of mine. And when I see these endless rumors, I do wonder, aren't you tempted sometimes to tell one of these reporters at Bradford and Abraham just some completely ludicrous junk rumor and see what kind of legs it gets?
Always want to tell Bradford something like that. Yeah, the other guys, no, they work hard, they do a good job, but I always like to steer Bradford in another direction.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I will say that Bradford today, among some other guys, I should say to be fair, reported here in the last couple of hours your team has strong interest in Kuroda. I'm wondering if that is accurate. You've had interest in him in the past, we know. What is your feelings of him as a pitcher, I guess I would ask?
Yeah, I mean, don't want to talk about free agents, obviously. You know, we have the universe of free agents out there right now. I mean, certainly everybody's aware of our needs and the players that would be of interest. I don't think that's any secret. There's quite a few of them. Certainly we have to look at ways to enhance our rotation, corner infield, corner outfield, most specifically in the infield, first base. All the guys that are out there we're connecting with, we're talking to the agents, obviously talking to teams on trade scenarios as well beyond the natural free agent fits. So, everybody's in play right now. It's the nature of the beast. And, Ben's grinding away out here, meeting with everybody, and, we'll see what happens over the course of the next month or so.
Can you speak, though, specifically about Kuroda as a pitcher, what you see for him just as a pitcher?
Yeah, I mean, he's a good pitcher. Certainly a guy that's able to haul 220 innings in the American League East is an interesting pitcher. He's got stuff. He's got obvious makeup to pitch in the division. He's a tough guy. We saw that, unfortunately, against us quite a bit this year.
So, Mike, dealing with the kind of broader universe that you alluded to about of starting pitchers, given the performance of the starting rotation last year and the fact that you guys are pretty comfortable with four of the guys that you're bringing back four guys for those spots, for that fifth starter, can you afford a so-called buy low guy, maybe someone who's trying to rebuild his value due to injury or diminished performance, or do you need to identify someone with greater performance certainty to round out your rotation?
Well, I mean, I think anybody would want greater certainty to round out the rotation. It's just a matter of what the cost is, whether it be in dollars or acquisition costs via trade with a player. The buy lows is something we're always looking at. We're always looking to take risks on those guys. I think, guys in our scouting staff have done a good job of identifying some of those guys in the past, and we'll continue to do those things. But, you keep working on both fronts. I think, look, you got to shoot for upside. You got to shoot for the guy that's going to make an impact in the rotation first, and then you got to reset your sights if you don't end up where you want to be necessarily on some of those guys, and maybe be able to go in another direction. But I think you work on all those fronts at the same time, and just because so many conversations are ongoing, they're happening every day. The market moves. It's fluid. Guys sign. Guys get traded. The market changes. And, you just need to be ready to make a deal or to get in play on somebody to make sure that those things don't go away on you without you getting a chance to participate. But I think, first things first, you're always shooting for higher rotation from an upside standpoint and talent.
Last year seemed somewhat extraordinary in that at the end of the free agent cycle, there was a Kuroda available on a one-year deal. There was an Edwin Jackson available on a one-year deal. Do you think that that can be replicated year over year, or was that just, luck of the draw for, preceding the 2012 season?
I think those guys are always going to be out there. Now, it may not be, you look back on 365 days from now, it's easy to say, hey, that would have been a home run on a one-year deal. But those guys are always out there, I think, to differing degrees of return in the past. But again, you're exploring both sides of those markets. But I do think those guys are always going to be out there.
Mike, one of the intriguing guys in the outfield market is Torrey Hunter, and I know you're not going to get into specific players, but just wanted to ask you, do you have any pause on a guy like that with his track record, with his age, just based on the experience you guys had with Mike Cameron, about 3 years ago when you signed him?
Can't get into specific stuff as you alluded to. I apologize, but let's say this: every player is an individual. Every situation is independent. It's fool's errand, I think, to make connections to guys that have nothing to do with each other just because they play a certain position or they're relatively the same age. There's so many more variables that go into each and every one of these guys. Their pedigree, where they come from, their performance track, their injury history, all those things that you have to weigh when you're making those decisions. You can't go into it and make them maybe do something one year and it doesn't work out exactly how you want it to, and then say, okay, from now on we're going to write off this type of player, whether it be age, whether it be whether they hit right, left, position, those types of things. You always have to be open-minded and examine every situation independently.
And the other thing, Mike, as you're kind of pursuing outfielders here, how mindful are you of the fact that you have Ryan Kalish, Brents and Jackie Bradley Jr. and just not blocking those guys once they're ready to be kind of full-time players for you?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have guys that we really believe in coming up, but it can't stop us from going out and making the 2013 team as good as possible as well. So, keeping those things always in the back of your mind when you're entering into deals or we're talking about trades. But, we have to be able to both satisfy making the 2013 team better as well as keep an eye on the long-term future.
Red Sox Assistant General Manager Mike Hazen joins us. Mike I was going to say Palm Springs. What town is it specifically?
I don't know. We're somewhere in the middle of the desert with a lot of mountains.
Indian Wells, right?
I mean, there is no difference between Indian Wells and Palm Springs, though, right? I mean, it's all the same.
I'm quite sure there's not. Dry, there's golf course out here, there's a lot of mountains.
What's the temperature?
I think we're hovering around 90 degrees each day. I think somewhat similar to what's going on up in the Northeast.
Oh, you have a wife and kids back here, right?
That's right. By the way, I saw Rob Bradford out at the pool today. A pretty sight. In case you wanted to know.
Last year there was plenty of Middlebrooks trade talk. I do wonder. I understand untouchable is a tricky word, but is he at the point now where you could not envision a scenario where he got moved at all for anybody?
It would be extremely challenging for us to move him. He's a very good player. I think what he did this year showed us the ability to play in our market, on our team. He performed extremely well. He dealt with a lot of challenges. Unfortunate at the end, get hurt, didn't get to finish off the season. This guy's a pretty important person to us and player. So, look, anything can happen, but I would probably say, that one's going to be a tough one.
With regards to the areas of positional need, you identified them, the first base, the two outfield corners, et cetera, starting pitcher. Is there any sense of whether you're more likely to acquire a first baseman via trade or free agent at this point? Because that seems like a particularly tricky market. I mean, how does that first base market compare to the supply-demand dynamics of like starting pitching in the outfield at this point?
Yeah. Extremely challenging question to ask right now, and not just in general of me trying to be vague and not give you guys any answers, but also of how the market shapes up. The GM's meetings is sort of the starting point of the conversation. Some of these teams just wrapped up their season, just starting to look at next year. Starting to hey, what are our needs going to be? What do we want? Agents are just starting to get out there talking to teams. By the winter meetings, you obviously have a much more solidified market in terms of where things are going. There'll be guys that jump early here over the next couple of weeks, and then there's going to be guys that are just going to just hold out. I mean, again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but, you play it on both fronts. You're dealing with the free agent market. You're constantly assessing that and watching which way the market moves. And then you're using that value to sort of determine, what is the cost going to be in trade? Once the dollars start getting beyond reasonable, you start looking at other avenues to acquire, and then on the other front, you get into that situation via trade where the players become unreasonable, and you start looking at the free agent market. So you gotta walk down that parallel path at all times, and still very early in terms of assessing what the market's going to look like, even 2 weeks from now.
So let's walk down a parallel hypothetical path, because I know you love hypotheticals.
I do.
When you have a need at first base, so in a hypothetical scenario, if Adrian, given where the franchise is now, if you had a chance to essentially repeat the Adrian Gonzalez deal, sending a few of your top prospects for an established star caliber first baseman, do you do it?
Hypothetically speaking?
Yeah, based on where the roster is now.
Joking. It's hard to say right now. I think looking at where we are today versus where we were a few years ago, we're in a different place. I think coming off the season that we did and looking for what we want to do and build for the next, 3 to 5, 7, 10 years, we're going to be relying on those young players to come up and be part of that core future. Now, that's not to say we're not going to go out and get the star player, too. It all comes down to the cost. At the time, the cost of that Gonzalez deal was what we felt like we should do at the time. It's it's impossible to say that situation is going to present itself again, and who those particular. And again, it comes back down to sometimes who those particular players underneath that player are going to be. Certainly we need to continue to enhance our rotation, our starting pitching depth. If somebody comes in and asks for that position, a first baseman for 3 starting pitchers, that's going to be a tougher thing for us to do at this point in time, because given what we're trying to build from a pitching standpoint, and that's so it's sort of challenging in that regard, because that hypothetical could go in a million different ways. But at the time, Adrian Gonzalez deal was the one we needed to make, but we're in a slightly different place than we were then.
Mike, how hard is it to gauge, where Iglesias and Lavarnway are at right now, and kind of what you can count on them for, next season?
Yeah, pretty tough. I think coming off of the end of the season, certainly it would have been a much easier dynamic walking into the off season had both guys hit 300 in September. Didn't do that. We have to trust what our scouts, what our player development guys, what their performance history tells us. I know, especially in Lavarnway's case, with regard to his offensive potential and what we've seen from a defensive standpoint, he caught more than he's ever caught this year. He doubled his innings caught this year. I think that probably ended up, pun intended, catching up with him at the end of the season. But it's tough to looking at it from a straight stat perspective and just completely say, hey, this is the way we're going. But at the same time, like I said, we have to go back and trust the evaluations, the time we've spent with this guy, the personality, the makeup, the work ethic, and believe in that. Iggy's a slightly different situation. He moved through the system fairly quickly. We definitely believe in this guy's defensive potential and think that he's going to have offensive potential as well. Just may be on a little longer time frame. But he has a chance to still impact the game right now. Again, I think it comes back to trusting, those in your system, your scouts, the player development guys that talk about these guys, that are with these guys every day, and really, really try to separate the performance that you saw in September. I mean, we go back to this. I'm not saying guys are going to show up and be rookies of the year and MVPs, but, had we taken this snapshot and had this conversation in the heels of the end of 2006, what was the conversation like on Dustin Pedroia? We try to remind ourselves of that a little bit to make sure that we keep this in the proper perspective. It's not to say that we don't use what we saw in September in some way, shape, or form, but we also have to keep it in some perspective.
Well, Iglesias, I think next year we'll have no excuses, because when I'm reading, you guys are going to hire like 13 hitting coaches, right? Is that right? Did I read that today?
That's right. Everybody gets a personal hitting coach next year.
Well, how does that work? Is there going to be 2 hitting coaches on this team? And if there is, are you guys close to naming them? Do we have some serious candidates in the mix?
Better question for John. I think theoretically that's the move that we've talked about internally. We're still trying to put the pieces of the staff together. We have some candidates, yes, that we've identified. We haven't started interviewing that group of guys yet. We should be working through that hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully have something wrapped up fairly quickly after that to have the staff in place. The big bones of the staff have been put together, which is, I think, a big advantage for us given the time we spent last offseason putting the staff together up through the end of November and into December. The focus has shifted much quicker this year to the personnel side of things, and the focus on the personnel, which is occupying a lot greater percentage of time. That can only help. But that's probably the direction we're going from a hitting coach standpoint. But the specifics hopefully will start to emerge here in the next week to 10 days.
All right, Mike. Here's what I want you to do tonight. I know you got a lot of stuff. If you get a couple of free hours, go down to the pool, drink in hand, plenty of eye candy. Lauber, Abraham, Bradford, in their bathing suits and lounging around the pool. I want you to enjoy that sight and then get back to work.
Wait, that's my eye candy?
Yeah, of course. Isn't that what you went to Palm Springs for?
I don't know. I think I'd rather see Brown and Spear at that point going down there than those.
It's a poor pool that you're drawing from. I hope your hitting coach is drawn from a better pool.
Don't I get to ask a question?
Yeah,
shoot.
Hey, Ian, have you lived down the infamous?
Oh, jeez.
A microphone instance.
Yeah,
the upside down mic.
I blame that on the guy. The guy who passed the microphone to me. I did a kind of reach around behind my back and tried to be all cool. And I don't think I'll ever live that down.
Yeah, accountability, dude.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, I think Gordon threw you right under the bus right after that too. I thought there'd be some camaraderie there, and everybody would pretend to not know who actually did it.
Oh, that's one thing those guys have is camaraderie all the way, Mike. No doubt about it. All right, thanks a lot.
All right, guys.
Good
have
luck,
fun
Mike.
up there.
Enjoy cocktail hour out there.
Yeah, will too.
Yeah.
Mike Hazen, Red Sox assistant general manager, kind enough to join us.